Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinosky, your host. I am very, very excited to be joined today by Tony Demakis. He's a fellow show host and a manufacturing influencer, even though he and his daughter are at odds about that. So Tony, welcome.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. I know that I had the pleasure of having you on our show a while back, and we talked about doing this reciprocal kind of show. And so this is unique for me for being on this side of the interview table. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and you know, share my story and our story at Alliance and what this is all about and what this looks like, and see where the conversation takes us today. So thank you for the opportunity and for your time today.
Absolutely. So Tony is president of Alliance Specialties and Alliance Laser Sales. So we're definitely going to dig into that. But before we do that, just tell my audience, you know, who you are, how you got doing what you're doing today.
Sure. So I have the privilege of being the president of Alliance Specialties and Alliance Laser Sales. My manufacturing background and my background in this company is not extensive. I am not one of those people that grew up in the shop wanting to work at the company, knowing that it was going to be my lifeblood and my destination. I am like the prodigal son who returned. And so growing up, I worked in the shop. I was a delivery boy. I polished. I had all of the runt jobs, the things that nobody wanted, the things that nobody liked. And it was purely intentional on my father's part. So he will say that it was justification or education. No, he would always say, if you don't want to do good in school, you don't have to. You have a job. This is going to be your job. Do you like this? And so he intentionally made my life miserable in all of the things. There was no free ride for the boss's son. That's a falsehood. That is not the reality of what that looks like. So much so where I think that I want to start a support group for people whose dads owned the company that they worked for, because it's not always an easy road. But he called it justification for higher education. And he said, if you don't want to go to school, this is what you're going to do. You have a job. And I did not like it. I thought it was miserable. I went away to Western Illinois University and got a degree in marketing and communications, and then just did that for a while. And it was great. My wife and I had a company. We did branding. We did marketing. Alliance was one of our customers. And so I knew some things about the company, but I didn't know all the things, right? I don't have the technical background. Tenths and thou and all that stuff still breaks my brain a little bit, but we have a really solid team of people that I can go to and I trust in those situations. So my journey into the company was one where I went away and we did our own thing. We had a branding and marketing company for a while. And when things got difficult, my father basically said, I went in one day and I was talking to my dad and I said, listen, I'm struggling. We're struggling financially. I'm not really sure what to do. And he said, you're a jackass. And I was like, what? Like I'm bleeding my heart out to my father situation. And in his typical response, he just goes, you're a jackass.
Hold on, I'm misting up a little.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I took a pause and he said, I'm serious. He said, I need you here and you're too proud to do it. You don't have any money and I can pay you and you won't do it, jackass. And you know, that was a clear message, right?
That is such a great story.
Yeah. And so I went home, I talked to my wife, and you know, neither one of us was shy to what the situation that we were in was. And so we had a conversation. We decided that I would bow out of our company. She would keep running it for the time being. and I would go to work at Alliance in the role of sales and marketing. And I did that. And what I found is I really enjoyed it. And I love building brands. I love communicating messages through artwork. It's not just words, it's stories, and stories matter, and people matter. And you get to tell all that, which is great, which is what I love about marketing and branding as a whole. And so part of that, along the way, I started going to different association events and getting myself more and more involved and becoming the quote unquote face of Alliance. My father wasn't going to do that anymore. I was doing that. And I also said, Dad, I know you don't know what this is, but I would like to start a podcast. And he said, you want to do a what? I said, I want to start a podcast. And he said, what is that? I said, it's basically an interview. Like I want to go and I want to talk to people in the industry, whether there are customers or not. And I think this is going to be a way for us to grow and create some synergy with people and have conversations that they wouldn't normally have. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about, but go ahead. If that's what you think, go ahead and do it. And I said, okay, the first person I want to interview is Stacy Bales. And Stacy Bales is one of our, he goes, you know, Bales is one of our competitors, right? I said, yeah, I know. And he was like, and you want to give them attention? I said, yeah, I do. And he said, why? And I said, here's the thing, Dad. If our customers leave us because they just hear of a new name like Stacy Bales or Bales, finishing, then they weren't our customer to begin with. They're not, they don't want to work with us. They just don't know that they have another choice. Right.
Yeah.
What if we create this relationship with Bales where, they do things that we don't do and we do things that they don't do? What if we can get 5% of the stuff that they don't do? What if they send it to us because we create a relationship and we break into this kind of discussion? And he said, do whatever you think. And so I did. And I actually really enjoyed doing the interview. It was a lot of fun. Stacy and I hit it off. We had a good conversation.
They've got such a great story themselves too.
Yeah. And we did do a little bit of work back and forth. We're still very friendly. We didn't lose any customers because of it. We didn't gain any customers because of it. But it was an opportunity for us to be able to just share a story. Yeah. And so from there, my journey just kept continuing into trying to find different people to talk to and interview and have conversations with. And when my father started thinking about the idea of retirement and stepping away, he decided that he was going to name me the president of the company because I had become the face of what that looked like. Yep. And I just kept doing it. And so today I still don't know how to use any of the equipment. I don't know how to use the machines. I am not a mold builder. I'm not a welder. I'm not a polisher. I am none of those things. Yep. I get to be the person that goes out and has conversations with people. I like to work on the culture of our brand. Yep. I like to work with the people within our company. And work on people, not on projects. And that's really what my focus is and how I got into this industry.
Well, we definitely need to dive into that part of it. But before we do, just I have a little hint from talking about Bales, but for our audience, just talk a little bit about what Alliance Specialties and Alliance Laser Sales does.
Yeah, of course. So the short version is we are mold builders that don't build molds. Which to a lot of people, they just kind of like, the what? It's real easy. Mold builders, there are certain things that mold builders need done that they don't do. And that's where we step in and help with our expertise. So we do polishing, everything from, mud flaps and buckets to medical equipment, A1 diamond finishes to paper finishes, everything on board, everything in between. So polishing, laser welding, laser engraving, hot runner repair, preventative mold maintenance. So that's the Alliance Specialty side of the world. Okay. And then in Alliance Laser Sales, we have a laser development center here in Illinois where we build and sell laser welding and laser engraving equipment, all American made, products and machines.
Nice.
I'm not going to say that every single piece and component within the machine is from the US.
Right.
We do the best that we can with that, and we source the best quality equipment that we can find. Some of those come from overseas and some of them are at home, but everything is engineered by us. Everything is built by us. Everything is manufactured by us and our partners. And so we think that's a really important thing. Is to have that made in America. So we do that. And then we also have a production welding facility inside of our laser development center where we're working on everything from aerospace to medical equipment, helping with high production volumes of parts that need to be welded. So we have our hands in a lot of different things right now. And it's good. It's good to have that kind of flexibility and range of services.
Yep. Got it. Let's talk a little bit on the people front and the leadership front.
Yeah.
That seems to be more of what you focus on. So what specifically do you see as kind of the important work that you've done there? And then what are you currently working on?
Yeah, I think that you could get really cheesy and like sing a song, right? Like the children are our future and the people are our future. I'm not a singer, so that's not going to happen.
We got the idea though, right?
Yeah, but the idea is like you can buy the newest piece of equipment. You can buy the best machines. You can spend all kinds of money in that. But if you don't spend your time in your people, it's all for nothing, right?
Yep.
And so I feel very strongly that before we build great products, we have to build great people. And, if you look around, we have a lot of there's not just we, but as a whole in society, there's a lot of damaged people, right? There's a lot of people that don't know truth. There's a lot of people that maybe they didn't have somebody helping them while they were growing up. They didn't have a guide to their life.
Right.
And so what does that look like, right? There have been so many different ways to do leadership. From the drill sergeant and screaming and yelling to somebody that's more like a William Wallace style where he's leading the charge, he's going into battle, he's fighting with his guys, and then you have to go from the full extreme of the drill sergeant yelling at you, you have the servant leader on the far side, where in my opinion there's never been a better servant leader than Jesus, and figuring out what that looks like. And so I feel very strongly on having an open door policy. People can come in and talk about whatever they need to talk about, whether that's work, whether that's their life. And we just sit and talk and have conversations.
Yep.
We need to be able to focus our energy on building quality people and teaching them to lead well, whether that's at work or for home.
Right.
Are we good husbands to our wives and our kids? What does that look like? Right. And so, I've gone through a couple books, or at least one book. There's one behind me over here, Kingdom Men Rising. That's a really good book. We did that with a group of guys at work. We watched some videos from time to time from the Global Leadership Summit or things like that, and just have these conversations that are real and inclusionary. With what that looks like. What does it look like to lead? How do you lead well? That's not micromanaging. That's giving people an opportunity and allowing them to run with those things, and not getting in the way of that.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's the most important thing that we get to do as owners of businesses is help to build people. Build them up and to have success in their life.
Well, there's clearly a piece, you're very open with your faith. And I think over the last few decades, we've almost made that a non-starter in the business world, which is insane because it's a huge part of people's lives.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about talking about faith without forcing your faith on people.
Sure. I think that's a challenge at times. But my faith is my faith, and I've
Yep.
had a journey. So for a long time, my parents went to church, and they would ask us to go to church with them. They would almost make it mandatory, but not totally mandatory. And I never had an interest. I would rather
Mhm.
stay home on a Sunday. I would just tell them my church is the road when I want to go out and run and train for a marathon.
Yep.
I don't have time for that. And that was the reality at the time. It wasn't important to me in my life.
Yep.
And then there's always an and then, right?
Right.
And then something takes place. For me, that and then was there was a time in our lives when we were transitioning from working at Alliance to not right before the business closed down, where we didn't have money. That was the whole Jackass story. And in that same time frame, we had 2 kids. We still have 2 kids. And we didn't have any money. And my mother had developed lymphoma. And so it was a really scary time. And I came to this realization that I can't do this on my own. We left the hospital, and I sat in my car and I cried. I was by myself and I cried. And I think for the first time ever, I prayed, and I said, God, I can't do this. Like, I can't do this on my own. Help me.
Yep.
And I felt, it sounds cheesy, and I know that, but I felt an immediate calm over my life that said, you don't have to do this. I do this.
Mhm.
Like, I've got this. You don't have to understand. I've got this. And I went, oh, okay. And I'm not going to say everything got better, but I did have a calm and a peace about all those situations and those issues that were going on in my life.
Yeah.
Everything has gotten better from that day. My mother got better. She's in remission, which is awesome.
Yep.
The opportunity
Wonderful.
came in with Alliance, and our financial situation is better. My family is in a better place. Like, all those things happen, right? And so that's my journey, and not everybody has that journey.
Right.
And so for me, it's a really important piece of who I am. And so I just live my life that way. I try to live my life imitating Jesus and being that person. And if somebody
Mhm.
asks, why do you do these things? Why do you go to a trade show and do this E210? Or why do you go, why are charity events so important to you? Why do you spend so much time with people when they're upset or need to talk? And then I can kind of share that answer with them.
Yep.
I don't need to run around and beat the drum at every event and say, like, go to follow my faith, right? I think everybody should, but that's not the action that I want to put out there.
Right.
It is important to me, and different people have different faith journeys. And so I feel like if you just live that out, and allow people to ask you that question, then you
Mhm.
can answer that question.
Right.
And just be open and truthful about it.
Yep.
I don't want to, I'm not going to come out on this podcast or our podcast on the Manufacturing Alliance or at a trade show and say, do you believe in Jesus? And they say no. And I'm not going to look at them and go, I'm not going to work with you and you're going to hell. Like, that's not a reality of my life.
Yep.
But I'm going to live my life in such a way. I'm going to try to the best of my ability, God willing, to live my life in such a way where people can see that spirit and want to know what's different, and then ask those
Mhm.
questions.
Yep.
And then we can have those conversations.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you're sharing your story, so it's not forcing it on people. It's, here's what happened with me and what works for me, and try
Yeah.
to live that example. Yep.
And I have 3 younger brothers, and their story is also different than mine. Their journey is
Mhm.
going to be different. And, some of them believe and some of them don't. And that's their journey. Everybody
Yep.
has their own life journey. And everybody will come to different realizations at different times. And that's okay. Right. That's the beauty
Right.
of it.
Yep. For sure. Okay. You also mentioned U.S. manufacturing, and I know there's so much talk about that. Let's first talk about a little more about what you're doing there. You talked about American-made machines, not
Yeah.
necessarily entirely American made.
Yeah,
What are you trying to achieve there? What do you think the value is for your own business?
sure. So I think that when it comes to products being made in America, um, there there is a different standard of quality that I think comes along with that. Um, but even before that side of it, as we're looking for people to have jobs and create opportunity for people that are better than maybe there was before, the more
Mhm.
things that we can do locally and stateside, I think the better off we are, because we're going to continue to teach people skills and trades, and we are going to
Yep.
continue to make ourselves more self-reliant um, in times of uh, national crisis, right? Like the pandemic came, and because we are a manufacturing country, we were able to raise to the level that we needed to
Mhm.
create ventilators or plastic partitions and do all those things that were necessary in a split second. Like in a moment,
Yep.
we went from having no idea what COVID was to having actual testing equipment. Now, you can argue that there wasn't enough, but if you know anything about manufacturing, the fact that it got made and created as quickly as it did is a
Yeah,
small miracle,
for
because you
sure.
had to take
Yep.
this unknown, and from the unknown, you create a thing to be able to test for it. Then you find out what that looks like. And now you have to engineer the testing kit. And then once you engineer the testing kit, now you got to build that thing. You got to build that
Mhm.
thing, and you got to get the plastic to be able to create the parts and all of the to be able to manufacture it, right?
Yep.
And then you have to go to production
Yep.
all within like a week.
Right.
And to be able to
Yeah.
do that is amazing, and very few people can understand that. I remember during the pandemic, people thought, well, there's not enough tests, this is ridiculous. Well, there was no surplus. Like nobody
Right.
knew what this was going to look like. So
Yep.
how do you know how much you're going to need, right? You went from nothing to something very quickly, which I think is something that is amazing, and
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
something that you can't talk enough about. The
Yeah.
ability for American manufacturing to shift that quickly, whether it
Yep.
was the beer manufacturers or the alcohol manufacturers saying, we're going to
Mhm.
stop making beer and alcohol, we're going to make hand sanitizer. We were
Right.
able to shift in a second to be able to provide what the country and the people needed in a moment's notice.
Yep.
If
Yeah.
all of that goes overseas, all of that ability goes away. And so what
Yeah.
we need more students to get involved and understand what manufacturing looks like, that it's not
Yep.
this dark, dirty, dingy thing, that it's actually this super amazing industry that allows you to take nothing and create something, that your ideas come to life, that you get to have a hand in creating life-saving equipment and life-changing products for the world.
Yep.
It's an amazing, amazing opportunity for young people and for us. And so just that need to be able to remember that we need the ability to be able to do that. We need
Mhm.
manufacturers. We don't need everybody to go to college. I went to college. I'm not saying it's a dead end thing. I'm not saying it's a
Yep.
waste of money. My son is at Illinois Wesleyan right now, and he is enjoying himself. But it's not for everybody, right?
Nope.
There is a track for it, but it's not for everybody. We have a wide range of things and skill sets that we need to fill.
Yep.
And some kids love working on their bikes. Well, if you love working on your bike, there's a good chance that you're not going to want to go sit in an office somewhere. It means that you're going
Right.
to want to work with your hands. And
Yep.
there are opportunities for you to have success in doing that. And we need to keep telling that story over and over and over again. And that's a long way of saying we have to continue to make things here. We have to keep having people fill those roles and making things here. It's not going to go away. Manufacturing is never going to go away in the U.S. I firmly believe that there will be new ways to do that, whether that's additive
Right.
manufacturing, whether that's robotics, whether that's automation, whether that's industry 5.0.
Yep.
All of the things will change, but you still need the idea person. You need the person to come up with the thing that says, how do we build this? This needs to exist. Let's make it, and let's make it here.
Yep. And that COVID example is a great one. What people need to understand is it's not the ability to make necessarily any given thing, but exactly what you're saying, the ability to shift and make what's needed. One of my favorite books is a book called Freedom's Forge by Arthur Herman that talks about how American industry shifted to produce what we needed for World War II. And you had, car makers making airplanes and tanks, and you had sewing machine companies making rifles. The ability to make things is, like you say, super critical. And then I love what you said about the people end of it. I think we've done a grave disservice to a lot of our youth in steering everyone toward college. And there were people I know caught up in that who would have been better working with their hands, who wound up behind a desk and miserable. So that's unfortunate, but I think we're correcting it now.
There's people that go to college because they think that they're supposed to go to college. They just don't want to get a job right now, right? That's not their interest. They want to go do whatever they want to do for the next 4 years. And honestly, that's fine. Right? I've had the opportunity to go to a couple high schools and talk to kids about, for careers days. And, you get some people that say, before you leave high school, you have to know what you want to do. It's like, are you out of your mind? I went down that road and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I'm 47 years old, and sometimes it changes. And I go, I don't know if this is what I want to do. Right. Like, how do you know that this is what you're going to want to do for the rest of your life? I think that you find something that you're passionate about, and you figure out why you're passionate about that thing. And then you find careers that work with that, or you find, whatever that looks like. But there's never going to be this thing. And unless you're like super special and you like since kindergarten, you're like, I'm going to be a math teacher. I don't know. That was my journey.
Exactly. Yep. Bigger picture on American manufacturing. What are you sensing out there in the world today? Do you think that the reshoring trend has legs? Do you think we're at a moment here in American manufacturing where we are going to be able to bring some things back?
I think it can happen very quickly. I'm not a history buff. My father-in-law is a history teacher. That's not my jam. But I do think it's important to look at, past the past to see what that might look like. And again, I go back to COVID. When COVID happened, we needed to reshore, right? Like, and most people in manufacturing will tell you that when that happened, China shut down, the border shut down. There was very, very little importing of anything into the country. And so what you saw was a boom in manufacturing, and we were able to handle it. Like, I didn't know anybody that said, this is too much, we can't do the work, I wish it would go away. Like, zero people said that. And so I think that this is another one of those examples where I think whatever your feelings are on the tariffs, I just posted a teaser on LinkedIn that I did with Lori Harbour when we were at MD&M West. Lori Harbour works at Whitfleet, and she has way more knowledge on tariffs than I do. And she spoke really, really well about the tariffs and what's happening with them and why it's important for people to understand what that looks like. Because it's one of those buzzwords that people get scared about. For a little less than half the country, tariffs are this big, scary word that means that the economy is going to shut down. For a little more than half of the economy, and I say that based on the election, tariffs are this word that means that we're going to bring jobs back and we're going to make manufacturing great again, right? And the reality is somewhere in between there. When you look at what Lori was basically saying is, when you look at some of the things that Trump is doing with the tariffs, it's not 100% for the manufacturing side. It has another purpose. And some of that purpose is bring world leaders to the table to have conversations about other things. And so the tariffs serve two purposes. One of them is to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Really, really important. I think the current administration feels that way, and they want to do something to make that happen. The other part of the tariffs is to start difficult conversations with some people that don't want to have any conversation. And so you hit somebody in their pocketbook, and then they're going to have a conversation with you. It's just
Exactly.
the way that the world works.
Yep.
And sometimes, as a parent, that sometimes you have to raise your voice and say things with a little bit more force, even though you don't mean it.
Right.
Or you don't totally mean it. And then you finish that conversation and you walk away and you go, I would like to thank the Academy. But what it does is it gets the point across, right? It gets the point across. I'm serious and you need to listen to me.
Yep.
And if you don't, there's going to be consequences, right?
Yep.
And it could be over something stupid, but it gets the conversation started and it gets your point across.
Right.
But when it comes to like, do I think that this has legs? I do. I think that the election was really rough for a lot of industry. And I think that people had a plan one way or the other, but they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to proceed at the time. And so there was a huge pause, right? Like I'm sure you saw it. 2024 had a huge pause in manufacturing. We had OEMs saying, listen, we would love to buy your equipment, but we have a total freeze for the year on our budget until we know what's going on. And so, from us to other machine manufacturers that I've talked to across the board, there was a huge downturn last year in manufacturing, and a lot of people felt it.
Yep.
And that's the reality, right? And right now, what we're seeing starting this year is a lot of companies saying our budget is back. We're ready to purchase. We're ready to move forward. Excuse me. The mold builders we know say we have projects that have been released now. We are ready to step into these. Get ready. You're about to get busy. And so that's a huge thing, right? Like people are now ready to go back in and work. And so I think there is going to be this turnaround. You and I were talking briefly offline about, you asked if we were busy and we're kind of busy. We see it ramping up. What I think is happening is the same thing that happened during COVID. It's a repeat where people during COVID got scared and they sold their businesses. They got out, right? Like there was private equity that was knocking on the door saying, this is an unsure time. What do you want to do? We'll buy your company. And they said, cool. Or they got slow. And instead of getting slow and dealing with the banks and financial uncertainty, they closed the doors.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is one of those times where the strong are going to survive, right? If you have the grit and you have the gumption and you kept your doors open through 2024 and you're fighting and clawing, you're going to find success. And I think that's the state that we're in right now for American manufacturing is like, the strong are going to succeed. And the weak are going to sell and they're going to go away. And the strong are going to take on some of their people and they're going to bring them in. And it's not going to stop. It's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to flourish. There's going to continue to be new companies and new opportunities, and people will continue to do it differently. That's the other part of it. It's going to change. It's going to evolve. It's going to get better. Yep.
Good. Excellent thoughts. Any last thoughts before we wrap up here, Tony?
I just think that, when you look at manufacturing, if you're listening to this, right? Like if you're sitting there and you're listening and you think, this is good for you, but how does it apply to me in my life? If you're somebody that's just listening to this conversation and you've never taken part in one of these conversations, I would invite you personally, and Jim, I'm sure you would say the same thing. Send a message that you want to tell your story. Right. Because the more of us that tell our stories, the bigger the industry grows, right? There's nobody in manufacturing that hates their job or hates their career or thinks it's pointless. We all think it has a purpose. We all think that there's room for growth. We all want to see the next generation get involved in that. And the only way that happens is by making it a little bit, quote unquote, sexy, right?
Mhm.
We
Yeah,
have to tell the stories. We have to get the interest. We have to have people know what it is that we do and why we do it. And so nobody's going to tell your story unless you allow them to tell your story.
Mhm.
And you have to be willing to tell your story also. So whether you're on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever that looks like, it's imperative that you get involved and you get in the game of talking about what it is we do and why what we do is so important. Because if you don't, nobody's going to know.
Yep.
Nobody knows that there's a problem if you don't tell them that there's a problem.
Yep.
And so right now there is a problem. We need more people. We need more opportunity. We need more stuff. But that only comes when you tell people how cool it is that what you do. Like,
yep.
and so we have to keep this going. We have to keep the momentum going. I think right now there's a lot of energy. Again, we were talking offline how many quote unquote industry influencers there are. And it's not necessarily the stories that mold making technology is going to tell, or plastics news is going to tell, or plastic technology, or fill in whatever magazine that is, because they're more concerned with the data points and the nuts and bolts, pardon the pun, of the day-to-day working. What we need to talk about is how cool the things are that we're making. The
For sure.
the stories, like we have a guy in our shop. He runs our mold maintenance department, and his wife had a stroke, and she had so they were in the doctor, and he's scared, he's freaking out, and she's freaking out, and they're in the doctor, and the doctor's talking, and he's looking around the room, and he starts to notice different things in the office that she's hooked up to, that we had a hand in working on the molds that made those parts. And so he has this realization that, the stuff I do actually matters, right? If those parts aren't made properly, then my wife's life is in danger. And I didn't even know that was going to be a reality.
Yeah.
And we all have those stories and the things that we're doing, whatever it is that you're part of making, it's affecting people's lives in a way that's not just, look at this iPhone case or whatever that might be. And it's imperative that if we want the industry to grow, that we all have to do our part to make sure the industry grows. And that, to me, that's the easy part of having the conversation and sharing what it is that you're doing, right? Like the question you asked me about faith, it's not ramming it down anybody's throat.
Right. Yep.
But it's sharing with people the importance of what you do, why it's important, and how they can be part of that. And the more people that know about that, the better off we're going to be. There's no reason that there couldn't be a news story on all of our manufacturing companies at some point during the year, because everybody's doing something really, really crazy and new and unique. Whether that's new ways to use automation and robotics or lasers or plastic or whatever that looks like. So my final thoughts for anybody listening is to not minimize who you are and what your story is, and to really, really, really get involved and think about it. And if you don't know how to tell your story, there are people that want to help, whether it's Jim and his show, or it's the Manufacturing Alliance podcast, or it's the Mavens of Manufacturing, or find any one of these manufacturing shows and say, I have a story that I'd like to tell. And they're not going to say no. I can promise you they're not going to say no. We want the stories. We want to hear your voice. Be part of the not just the industry, but the conversation and the movement to make manufacturing great again.
Very well said, Tony, as always. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Dude, I appreciate it. I'm sorry that it took so long to get back to you. I'm glad that we got to make this happen, and
me too.
And that we were able to reconnect. I think it's great. Thank you for everything that you do in sharing about manufacturing. I think it's a great industry that we get to be a part of, and I respect you for doing it. So thank you.
Right back at you, Tony. Thank you. Do check out Tony's Manufacturing Alliance podcast and take a look at what he does at Alliance Specialties and Alliance Laser Sales. He's on LinkedIn, posting there all the time. If you're not following him there, you need to be. So yes, thanks again, Tony. And of course, thanks to you in the audience. You are why we're here, and we're here every Tuesday. I can't promise every story is going to be as just incredibly insightful as what Tony brought us today, but they're all at least a little insightful. So check back every Tuesday. We'll be here. In the meantime, thank you. And I'm Jim Vinosky with Manufacturing Talk signing off. So long.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.